Hello, freaks, geeks, degenerates, basement dwellers, and random weirdos online. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Skruffy, and this is Skruffytalez. And Ukraine is gaining ground at Sumy, and they are perfecting the encirclements down at Pokrovsk, tightening the noose around three distinct pockets where they will trap Russians by the thousands. Russia is advancing in other locations. They have some gains in Sumy, has to be said, and at Lyman they are close to achieving important objectives. But Pokrovsk is the big thing. If Ukraine can pull off this spectacular victory with these three encirclements, maybe even four, it's gonna be a disaster for the Russians, and they're gonna have to suffer. They're gonna suffer politically, militarily, and propaganda-wise. It's gonna be a massive cluster F-bomb, so to say. So, but let's take a look at the maps, beginning up in Sumy and working our way down towards Pokrovsk eventually. Right, so short one using Andrew Perpetua's maps, beginning with Sumy, where Russia has actually had some success. We know Ukraine is having success as well, don't get me wrong. You can see here how they've actually pushed in closer to the border with Russia here at Stepny, Novo-Konstantinivka, and they're pushing up here this way on down. This is a big hill. Right here is the top of the hill, and they're now working their way downward. They've taken this part here right next to the lake, isolating the Russians over here, and they're pushing downhill, and the Russians south of the lake, they're obviously having issues. They can only be resupplied with drones and maybe a boat or two, right? So the Ukrainians are pushing downhill here. Pushing in closer to Oleksivka, the Russians have hung on to this town or village for I don't know how long. You can see Ukraine has been trying to come in from the north, applying pressure to the south, but the Russians, they're not giving up. We have also seen there's been pushes by Ukraine into Varachny as well, but Russia has been advancing in Yunakivka in the past 2 to 3 days. We should not forget that recently Russia is advancing in Yunakivka, even if Ukraine is having success along the western flank here. I haven't updated my own map here, so I need to do that later on. But it's kind of, the front line is kind of tilting, so it's going north over here and going south over here. So it's tilting around Varachny being the center point where everything is moving around at the moment in Sumy. Moving down to Kupiansk, ISW has shown us that Russia has pushed back into Mirove or Moskova or Moskovka or whatever it's called. So Russia has made a push back here, after which Ukraine counterattacked, tried to come up here between Radkivka and Mirove, as it says on this map. But Russia has since then secured this territory again. Let's see if we can see that on their map here. Moskovka right here. So the Russians came back out here, having been pushed back. Ukraine tried to come up between Radkivka and Moskovka, but now Russia is back in control of that territory. And interesting to note, like we've talked about before, coming through Moskovka down towards Sobolivka, this here is a valley. Russia or Ukraine has massive defensive positions right here along the road here, and they have defensive fortified positions, that is, and they have fortified positions up on the high ground west of Moskovka and Sobolivka. So coming down here into this valley, it is dangerous for the Russians. You have Ukrainians in Kupiansk, fortified position in these woods, and fortified hills, high ground to the west. So might be why Russia is not pushing south from Moskovka at the moment. They did, if, as you remember, came down this way into Sobolivka, into this kill zone, being outflanked on three sides by heavy Ukrainian fortifications up on the high ground. So they're a bit more careful. And they know that walking south into this valley is a death trap. So yeah, beyond that, not much is happening on the maps here. The front line seems to be a bit static to the north of Kupiansk at the moment. Moving down to Lyman, this is an important part of the battlefield. You have Lyman down here. Russia is pushing out here, as you can see, having success trying to reach Derelove. We've talked about this 2 weeks ago, I think, but it needs to be highlighted again. Russia wants to come down along this river to reach the Oskil River, because what they do then is they cut all supply lines coming in from the north to Lyman, and the river itself becomes a defensive barrier for the Russians to hold. So they will try, more than likely, push out the river to use it as a defensive barrier to defend their own territory, to hold on to it, and deny logistics coming in from the north to Lyman. And that leaves Ukraine with few options. Let's see here, my map. We're going to jump up to Lyman, Sloviansk, Lyman. Okay, so the Russians are coming in here, up here to cut Lyman off, and that leaves Ukraine with these bridges. As you can see, they're not the most reliable. You have bridges elsewhere. Where are those bridges? Over here we have another bridge. Yeah, might not be the best one to rely upon. And the same thing goes over here, right? So as you can see, we can jump back to Andrew. If Russia manages to push out to the Oskil River, as I suspect they will eventually, Lyman is a bit on its own, unfortunately. And if Russia can secure this part here and begin pushing closer to Lyman, then they can use the Oskil River as a defensive barrier, set up artillery, rocket munitions and everything here around Lyman, and bombard Sloviansk and Kramatorsk from the north, and can begin strikes against these main supply lines that are coming in from the north into the fortress belt. There are other roads. They're not going to cut logistics. I mean, all you need to do is zoom in a bit and you can see that Kramatorsk can be supplied from the west. So they're not going to cut logistics entirely. They're just going to reduce the effectiveness of Ukrainian logistics. But before we get that far, Russia has some obstacles to overcome. Lyman itself, of course, a large town or a small city surrounded by woods. This is where you can hide a lot of Ukrainian soldiers. You can build a lot of trenches and fortifications, and you can hide supply depots and what have you. So this should be a tough fight for the Russians, trying to push in through all of these woods, pushing through these marshes and fighting in Lyman itself. That said, if they succeed and pull it off and take control of all of this, these woods will obviously help Russia in the same way. They can hide their artillery, they can hide their supplies, they can dig in. Lyman will be a fortification where they can find shelter from Ukrainian drones and artillery and what have you. That will allow them to maintain a steady barrage and indirect fire missions on Sloviansk and the supply lines leading into the fortress belt. So that's the situation at Lyman. Dangerous situation. The Russians are close. It's only 5-6 kilometers from where they are at down to the Oskil River, and if they pull that off, Lyman is in trouble. It's going to be difficult to move enough supplies to maintain a functional fighting force without those bridges, relying on boats, maybe pontoon bridges and drones to supply Lyman. Sorry, I had to clear the throat. What else is going on? We have Ukraine pushing back here at Katarinivka in this pocket here. This does look like it might be time for Ukraine to abandon this pocket if the Russians can come up to the east and west of this large lake. You don't want to be trapped here. Counterattacking might be an indication that Ukraine is trying to open up a corridor so that they can move out this way. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. Gonna return to Pokrovsk in a moment. We're just gonna highlight here. This is where Russia is steadily advancing. This push here has to be said. It's slow going though. This is not a blitzkrieg assault whatsoever. They are advancing their usual 80 to 100 meters per day on average, as we've discussed over the past 2 years. If you take a look at the distance where they've gone from Avdiivka to over here in 2 years' time, it's roughly 80 to 100 meters per day that they have advanced. And they're kind of maintaining that stride in this section. But they are advancing. This is where Russia is having success and are slowly pushing the Ukrainians back. And well, coming in towards Zaporizhia and potentially Dnipro in the long run, but that is after how many years of fighting? That's going to take them 3 or 4 years at this rate to reach the Dnipro River and Zaporizhia and Dnipro. Now we're going to head on over to Pokrovsk and zoom in because we have some Russian advances over here. Some Ukrainian counter moves at Razina, and if we move over to Deep State, we can see even further updates here. You can see here, this is on the 9th, moving up to the 10th, and you can see how they're tightening the grip here and expanding here. And this is basically what I've been showing on my map, and it seems as if Deep State is just catching on to what everyone else has been saying, to be perfectly honest. But it's good that we get this confirmation, because the Vatniks, they usually always return to Deep State what Deep State is saying, so that Deep State is now aligning with other maps, and aligning with my map is a good thing, because then they can't argue with my map. So this has been under Ukrainian control, Volodymyrivka, for some time. Contested, yes, but Ukraine has been operating down here. Over here on my map, it is this bit that Ukraine has liberated. Let's take a look at my map. We were at Lyman here. So zooming in, here you go. This is the bit we were talking about that I have as Russian. Ukraine is now pushed back into this valley and pushing the Russians back down to these windbreaks, which is good. The Russians have pushed up through these woods, according to Andrew and other mappers. I haven't updated this map either. And here we have Volodymyrivka. We've had indications that this part here has been under Ukrainian control for some time. Ukraine the other day pushed out into this valley, securing this part of the battlefield, pushing the Russians away from these two bridges here when they pushed into these windbreaks and pushed through this valley down here. So very important. And of course, if we take a look at Deep State again, take a look at this. So this is their latest update, that Ukraine is now pushing through Mayak and coming in from Nikhanorivka here from two sides. Sorry, bit of an edit there. So two sides, and it's a very narrow corridor here for the Russians, and you know, it's not looking good for Russians. So let's take a look, because that means that Ukraine is putting pressure on Pankivka and Mayak, and potentially that means these trenches here on top of this huge hill is back maybe under Ukrainian control. And there's also claims then from Deep State that Ukraine has left Nikhanorivka and has pushed into this valley around these lakes. And if this is true, that we have Ukrainians here and here, that means you only have this wide open field up on this ridge. This is a ridge line on some high ground. And as you can see, it's a wide, huge open field if the Russians want to move logistics north into this pocket here. And we've been talking about these pockets before. And since they have this success, right here where Russian forces should be the strongest, this is the breach point. This is where they are moving through to support these guys. If Ukraine can actually push here, as seems to be the case, that means, to my mind, that the pressure on Boykivka is real. This is where you have a bridge across the marshes and the river, and this is where Russian logistics can move through to support the front line. And as we can see here, Ukraine has moved in to put pressure on Boykivka itself, and they're coming in from the north towards Novotretsky, putting pressure on this bridge, this vital logistical line for the Russians. And since they are pushing here now, by the looks of it, closing this gap to perfect and complete the Sharkova pocket, the Sharkova encirclement, that tells me that Russia is having issues resupplying these troops. More than likely because Ukraine is applying pressure here at Boykivka. So the fact that Ukraine is pushing in out of Nikhanorivka and through Pankivka tells me that the pressure on Boykivka is real and Russia is having issues supplying the troops in the Sharkova pocket. And having pressure on Boykivka is crucial as well, because that means that you have pressure on the Rodynsky pocket. Remember these three pockets? Kuchevyar pocket, Sharkova pocket, Rodynsky pocket. You can't move through Boykivka to supply these troops, and Ukraine is pushing out of Novoekonomice towards Razine, putting pressure on Razine, not securing it yet as far as we know. But Russia can't utilize this crossing point across the river, and they can't come across around Razine either. That means you potentially have isolated the Rodynsky pocket, and they will be running low on ammunition, food, and fuel, and what have you soon enough as well. And Ukraine pushed out here a couple of days ago. Now they're pushing up here. And they've pushed out to Myrne. They have reclaimed Novoekonomichne. They launched a counterattack here in the south, reclaiming this factory a day or two ago, which is important. They're securing the flank down here, pushing Russia away from coming up behind the Ukrainians at Novoekonomichne. So overall, the Russians are in tremendous trouble here at Pokrovsk, and this tells. I think this is why they're sending in all these reinforcements from Sumy and from Kherson and elsewhere, because they are being pushed back, and they understand that if Ukraine successfully grinds down these three pockets that they more or less have created, it's going to be a PR disaster for the Russians, and it's going to be hard hit on morale, more than likely, across the board in the Russian army. Russia needs to address this. They need to break open these pockets so they can bring in logistics and reinforcements. Because if Ukraine, as it seems they're able to do, if Ukraine pushes in at Boykivka and Razine, then you have these three distinct pockets where you have surrounded Russian units that will eventually run out of ammo, run out of food, run out of fuel, and then it's only a matter of time before Ukraine can begin mop-up operations and start collecting thousands of POWs north of Pokrovsk. So, yep, that's it. That's all I have for you this time around. Really interesting. I mean, we're seeing Ukraine having success at along various parts of the front line. Yes, Russia is advancing at Lyman and at the Bulge, pushing out towards Zaporizhia, south of Pokrovsk. Absolutely, undeniable. But Sumy Oblast and Pokrovsk, Russia is struggling in these two locations, and they are scrambling to save the situation in Pokrovsk, because the Russian frontline units there that are being threatened with encirclement, they are in real, actual trouble. And we've reported on this for quite some time now, how Ukraine will try and come in and cut them off and split up the Russian forces, divide and conquer, as it were. Anyway, that's going to have to be it. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.